What's up, guys? Pittsburgh Weiss Schwartz back again with yet another deck tech for you. Today, I am joined by Tanner, our resident Hololive expert, as well as Carmen.
What's up?
How's it going?
And we are, I guess, settling into Hololive month here, leading up to the release of the set itself at the end of April. I think we're just doing strictly Hololive content for the rest of the month here is the plan.
Yeah, for deck techs for sure.
And
All alive. There's a lot to cover.
Yep,
A lot in the set.
Starting off with probably the most infamous one, the Rushia deck.
Not a VTuber, by the way.
I don't know who this character is. That is not a Hololive talent.
That's why she's trying.
I have no experience playing this deck myself. I'm here for moral support today, so I'm going to turn it over to Tanner and Carmen.
All right. Well, here's the whole deck list laid out. For the most part, this is one of those decks where if y'all saw 8 Standby Quints going around when that was going around on Twitter, when that was like the super big hotness, was still a big deck in JP. It was lauded as a deck that played 47 of the same 50 cards in every deck. Rushia is pretty similar. There are not a lot of slots for you to mess with as the way the package works. You're basically pigeonholed into very specific cards, and then there's really good plussing zeros that complement those cards that you want to play. So you're kind of limited to maybe, it's not as bad as 8 Standby Quints, but maybe like somewhere between 5 to 8 slots that you can mess with. The rest of the list is pretty ironclad because it's a very direct strategy to do what you want to do every game. There's various things you do and things you need to hit. I think Tanner, you'd agree.
Yeah, I think around 5 seems to be pretty close after re-looking at this list. But yeah, the deck's pretty set in stone with a little bit of tech and spice you can add into it.
Yeah, the slots, when we say there's few slots, they're still very important slots because the way Rushia works, and of course your combo is very selective, you pivot into specific cards if you decide to play tactic matchup. So you have good access to them. So your few tech slots are still very relevant. So let's hop into the specific cards because this deck is currently in JP. We don't have the English cards yet. We have a little translation up here, but we're going to get cards proper. We're going to start out with the Onion Ricky, the Aqua Ricky. This card is absolutely insane. It's a common. You crack these, you hold on to them. So it is a 3,500 if it's in the center lane, and on death, pay 1, put a Hololive character from your waiting room at the bottom of your clock, so it helps you set color. Stage to waiting room, so when it dies, look at 2 cards from the top of your deck, choose up to 2 characters, bring them, show them to your opponent, put them in your hand, ditch the rest. So the benefit of this card is twofold. It is a plussing 0 if it's in the center. It's a 3,500, so there's a lot of center runners in the meta, so the fact that this sits in center at a big power means your opponent has to tie it or pump their 3,500 center runner to run over the card, or typically tie it with their other 3,500 either evasive cards or utility cards. So it either trades or holds board, and then when it does die, it helps you set your color. Notably, we have a dual color level 1 to enable our Subaru here. It's one of the most important cards for ensuring that your Subaru color condition is met every game. We'll talk about that when we get to, but it helps you enable that, and then of course it might be a +2 instead of just a +1. It is not selective. That is the worst part of the card, unlike other Rickies, but we play a completely different level 1 combo to ensure that we hit our select cards. We get all the benefits of the card and not really any buybacks. This card's really insane. Every time I build a Hololive deck, I always start out with 4 of this card and then begrudgingly cut some if I cut any at all, because the card is so strong, especially in the current meta with lots of Rudy runners and stuff running around.
Yeah, another thing that you can do with this is if you're on like maybe a 4-card deck that you left and you just can't get through it, and or otherwise you can always just play over this to to thin your deck and then not leave grave, which is important if you are playing a mirror or into a Rushia, is to make sure that you have no or very little grave.
Yeah, you don't want to be left susceptible to shuffle back. Yeah, this card's really obnoxious. I think everybody who's bad against it will probably agree. And if you haven't, well, you're about to. It's going to show up in a lot of decks, especially being a common, one of the best cards that common is. All right, moving on. Other quote-unquote plussing 0 slot, we got the Miko Drop Search. It is a 3,500 Drop Search Life character. The drawback is basically nothing. Gives you a A2 Encore, pretty whatever, especially early game. Might be relevant later, but ever trash card. Your Encore step goes first, so the card not going to be on the stage. Be gone before your opponent has a chance to go to their own. You don't have to worry about it if it's a chumper, and in the early game, fairly really. But yeah, it gives you that extra selection going from 0 to 1. Again, the Ricky's not selective, so helps us rip our combo pieces out of deck, helps us find specific pieces later in the game if we happen to whiff combo, something like that. And of course, being a plussing 0 slot, this is a super premium profile. I think most decks are probably going to play quite a bit of this card, especially being one of the only good red fixes. The set red is pretty scuffed unless you go whole hog. But
yeah, card's good. I mean, its power line is really nice, just in case. Even if you don't open any of your aquas and you need a card to play down at 0, it might live cross turn and plus you there even if you don't get its drop search effect.
Yep. All right, moving on. 3 Noel Brainstorm. This is a requirement to play the Rushia package. That is why we're playing a draw Brainstorm as our primary Brainstorm. If you have 2 or more other characters, your Flare, which is the level 1 combo, which we do not play in this deck, and the Rushia 2, which come down early, gain 1,000 power. So it's Apple's global power to Rushia Flare that we do play. Then it's a 5-card draw Brainstorm. Draw Brainstorm specifically in this deck, or after the Rushia comes down, your entire life is recurring the Rushia combo, and all you need to do is draw a climax. The way the deck is built and the way your strategy works. Draw Brainstorm is actually pretty preferable after playing it for a while. I was sus on this. A lot of people are sus on this. The reason they won't sleeve the deck, they're really sus on the draw Brainstorm. Definitely leave it up and give it a try. It's really not that much of a detriment to the deck, and the 5-card deck speed is actually really nice. I think people the 5-card draw Brainstorms are catching on. You know, Dean just put out some content on the Burn 1 channel talking about the Blake one that's like the same thing. It's really groovy, stuff like that. So 5-card draw Brainstorm, especially on first deck if you're doing a Brainstorm, it's more cards so you don't feel as bad as you whiff, and if you do whiff, you draw an extra card, so 6-card mill, or if you do not whiff. If you hit, you're going to get 6-card mill off 1 stock, which is pretty good. Yeah, pretty simple card, but we have to play it. Card that I choose to play, but some people I have seen have not been playing it, but I think you do need, is the Fuki Cheery. It is a super solid card. It is a level 1 or higher Cheery, so on death, card any card, check up top 4, add a level 1 or higher card. That card part is not relevant to our deck, but the most relevant part is that it is 1500 power on play. Helps us make sure that our Korone combos, you know, they are very big, hit over standby, or at the very least challenge standby. Korone can all of its shots on 1 lane, so even if it's a smaller lane, if you want to ensure that you get the reverse, this card is pretty invaluable. And again, filtering from 0 into 1 to help find our pieces. Our Ricky is not selective, so any amount of mill and dig to find the piece we need to have a successful level 1 turn, the more the merrier. So we are choosing to play 2 will count for 1 or higher Cheeries, as they are a little more limited than level 0 Cheeries, but I think it's a really important card for the deck. Off color, you don't play any other green really. Just the power pump effect is very desirable. Moving on, we have this Drop Salvage. It is a on play, optional mill top 3, nice good first deck speed. Our level 1 combo doesn't mill at all. It helps us get us in our good refresh. Since we are just 1k1 deck, we still want to hit that good refresh timing. We have other tools, but you know, extra deck speed, nice. It's not up to 3, it is mill a straight 3, so you have to mill to it. And then Drop Salvage, this gives us waiting room access. Our Brainstorm is draw, our combo is search, our drop search is search, so we need a way to access our waiting room. The Dredgevac cards that we need to recur our Rushia strategy, so that is why we're on 2. It is also notably red, one of the other really good red splits. The extra 1k is also pretty nice, helps us edge out lane at level our Korone. Since we are calling our shot, we just want to make sure we get that 1 reverse, so play double combo on this down to grab back another Korone or something like that, or a combo piece later can help us win our lane. So really nice red splash, just drop salvage action.
Yeah, when I don't have the Cheeries in JP because I got a lot of Hololive in English coming, so I didn't want to invest too much in it in JP while I waited. So this has been like the only way that I've been able to use pumps onto my Korones to get them over. So that effect definitely is super helpful, especially if you're, you know, playing a little bit on a budget and don't want to spend that extra for those Fubukis, that since they are double rare, this is like an extra way to help get some of that power pump onto it.
Something tells me in English that Hololive base rarity is going to be pretty affordable.
That is true as well.
We'll see. Ashoka didn't drop too much, so we'll see. Moving on, another trial deck card here. We got the Sheep. So the Sheep is a Climax swap. Pay 1, discard a Climax. Salvage Climax is important. Again, we need a Climax. Make sure we recur our Rushia. We always make sure that we get our combo off turn after turn after turn. Also has a nice upside effect. When damage dealt by this card is canceled, you can put this in dock. So it's a little bit of extra dock charging. You spin into an open lane after you swap your Climax. If you have 2 Rushias down or in the early game or something like that, and maybe your opponent cancels in that lane, you get dock, which helps you, you know, Brainstorm, salvage, do whatever you want. Because after the Rushias come down, you do end up running pretty lean. So you're having a really high rolling game, a really stock crit game, where the level first deck was like really extended by first deck cancels. So in a normal game where you're playing pretty lean after Rushia comes down, the fact that this may give you extra stock just comes even better. Moving on, we have the Xion. The Xion was a popular tech in JP and also in Airman's WGP roll deck tech that he did on Rushia. It is a really cool card that helps our Rushia dodge Adachi, especially Adachi is the hard remove board because she has hand knuckle. So it only targets the card across from it. It is a really weird quote unquote plussing effect intended to help you, move your opponent's board around so that their card crashes and one of other cards live. But at level 2, when you play this down in an open lane because your Rushia is winning board or something like that on a follow-up turn where your opponent may struggle to respond depending on the way the game state is playing out, especially if they're still level 1, if they're like canceling and you have Rushias down, you can slam this card down into an open lane and then your opponent is unable to Adachi or Rushia because you swap it into this lane and the Xion will die because pretty much all Adachis handing over this, but it will save your Rushia to live another day. You can bring another card into the Adachi and clear it safely. It's a very cool card because of the way the deck is shaking out and things that you need for the Upena, especially make sure that your Rushias stay on the board as long as possible. If you're only playing one, you're going to have to use Foresight to make sure that you grab this card again. You have a lot of selection, so if you're approaching that game state where your opponent's still at level 1, they might play down an Adachi to clear your Rushia, get it off the board when you're at level 2. Use some Foresight to pick this up and ensure that your opponent cannot clear your game.
And normally, like the turn this is played, if you need to side with that lane, just if they don't leave you an open lane, you're playing Climax normally with Rushia, so it's still gonna, you're normally siding level 1, so you'll still get a damage in. If they leave you a 0, all the more.
All right, level 1's very lean, only 2 cards. We have the Korone T-Combo. So it is on play, gains 500 power times board, including self, so it can get up to 7k, 8k with Climax. Then on attack, if you have the choice in your Climax zone, and you have another character, you choose one of your characters, and it gets on reverse search. So it lets you call your shot. It can't choose itself, so if you try field this, you can stack them all on the same Korone and search all at the end. Being able to search on your last attack after your opponent has taken damage has pretty good implications and informs your searches so that you search for the right cards because you know where your opponent will be when you drop the next turn. So it gives you a little bit more information, your searches. In this deck, that is not as relevant because we are simply trying to hit very specific cards as quickly as possible. We need to hit the Rushia, we need to hit the Noelle, and we need to hit the 2-1 Flare. We need to hit those cards. So any greater amount of selectivity is paramount. We need to make sure that we get our card because we have to play that drop Brainstorm. We're going to opt for a selective combo and a good one at that. Being able to call your lanes, get that much power means you're probably going to get that one reverse that you need unless your opponent went to level 1 first and they played a full board of Errands or something terrifying, a full board of Mega Meeting if your opponent's playing both, which are pretty rare. So you will likely get your one reverse for your multiple Korones, get off all your searches, get all your pieces, and be prepped for level 2. Selectivity is the name of the game because the rest of our deck and other strong cards are not selective. We need to sharp up selectivity however we can, so we opt play Korone. The choice is also very nice. We run a large suite of level and some other level 2s and extra counters and stuff like that, so we can take advantage of that choice, generating extra stock or pulling cards back to hand. A lot of, obviously, pulling a Rushia back to hand to spawn another one on a following turn is a good play, or just adding extra stock because we're going to pay it out. We get 2, but likely to do our effects and get root onto the board. So very important card for the deck. Definitely helps. The other super important card, our other 4 Hov at level 1, is the Subaru Azusa. This is an Azusa with a ton of restrictions. And guess what? It's still broken. On-play Azusa is a disgusting profile, and it always has been and always will be. It's the ultimate deck manipulation tool. It is the ultimate filtering tool. It will never get better than this, no matter how hard they try to make it play. So that restriction is experience. You must have a blue card in your level zone. And if you notice, this card is yellow, so it forces you to play a dual color level 1. And the Aqua Riki, like we talked about, is on death and helps you that color. So you can freely level a blue card, then use Aqua when you go to level 1, set a yellow card in block. Or if you are still at level 0, Aqua can actually put herself in block because she is engraved when her effect activates. So she can put herself at the bottom of your clock, setting a easy blue card for you to level, where you can then block a yellow card, typically a Marine or something like that, so that for Grave or Rushia turn. But it's very easy to hit your dual color level 1. It is not a liability unlike other decks. You very, very rarely hit the fail case, and it is far less of a fail case than other dual color level 1 like permanent strategies. And in the worst case, where you are forced to level yellow, it is still a 105k beater that you can play at level 1s. The card is not completely dead in your hand. It is still a attacker that can attack relatively profitably at 6k with Climax now. So not too bad. And all rather later in the game, it's just an absolutely broken deck speed pool. Anything else anyone wants to add about Azusa? Just a broken profile.
Yeah, I mean, not much more to say. Card's broken, profile's sick.
Yeah,
it does everything.
It does do everything. Level 2's the Flare that I already mentioned. If you're a level 2 or higher, you may pay 2 and rest this specific card and your Noelle Brainstorm on a Rushia 3 from your hand. So this is how you early play. That is 3 stock for you to play down this Flare and then tap down the Noelle and the Flare to summon the Rushia. Just pay 2. You are effectively paying 3 to get this on the board. However, when the full board comes down, Rushia is at 10-5. She's getting the extra global 1000 from the Noelle, 11-5, and then in front of this, she is 13. A very good stat line, especially considering when you play a Climax, she's down at 14. Rushia can spawn cards. That brings out another card at like 16-5. Then you have backups to send you to 15-5 or higher. So you are going to be playing for board from level 2 onwards, and this is a really easy way to get a lot of power while spawning Rushias out every single turn. We will get into the play pattern of how you should most optimally play Rushia when we get to the card very short. If you happen turn to draw this card somewhere in your opener, you are playing on a 6-card hand. This is an important part of the deck that not a lot of people realize. They try to get greedy and throw the flare. They say, I have choice, stuff like that. You do not want to waste salvages and things of that nature to get this flare back in the later game. If you happen to draw this card, maybe not in your opener, you can mulligan it, but you cannot greedily ditch the card and say that you will get it back because we are only playing.
Yeah, I was going to say, it is a 2 of that. I noticed that there. Yeah, I normally always open this card, so I'm just used to playing on a smaller hand with this because, you know, even though you do have ways to grab it like through your Ozlisa, it's just not worth the risk. I mean, having Rushia come down is your game plan.
Yeah, so if you open it, you're playing on a 6-card hand the rest of the game. Card cannot leave your hand until it's played to the board. Level 2s, the rest of them are counters. We are playing 2 of the Hachima tap counter. Unlike other tap counters where you must pay 5 and discard an additional character, this is discard 4 characters. I am of the opinion that this profile is a mistake. This should never have been printed. I think this is disgusting. For the field, how many times have you been completely blown out by your opponent that draws up with a 2-card hand? How many times? How many times has that happened? It is a very large amount because in White Schwartz, you can do this thing called brainstorming or clocking or God knows how many other effects to just rip extra cards back to your hand. Especially in a deck like Rushia, where as long as you have your climax and as long as your Rushia combo will get you back to 5 cards to support that you can play this card again on your follow-up turn, you don't care about your hand size at all. So in this specific set, in this specific deck, I think this is a mistake. I think this is way too ridiculous. I think a lot of people were sus on this at the beginning. They're like, holy shit, I have to discard my entire hand to do it. But when it just gets you another turn to slam down more Rushias and just go ham again, I think it's really, really disgusting. What do you guys think? I want to field that. I think this card's a mistake.
I mean, it turns out living is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and compared to other tap counters like the one in Mushoku that we're seeing a lot of lately, the fact stands that in most decks, provided you're not playing any form of extra stock generation, you are limited to 3 stock per turn. And like you said, your hand has no such restriction. You can hit a brainstorm. You're playing a draw brainstorm, so you get an extra card in there. You hit 2 or 3 off your brainstorm, and all of a sudden your hand is full again, and you can just play this for free.
Not to mention your Rushia's plus when they do their most destructive effect.
Yeah. So. When they do the shuffle back effect, you get a card to your hand too, which makes this even dumber for sure.
It lets you recur it. Yeah, I think it's really disgusting. I don't think this was thought about enough in like play testing. I think it's fine because like the Rushia deck does have like limitations, things that it doesn't do well, but it is definitely like the most disgusting part of the deck. Your opponent can tap counter over and over and over again and realistically continue to play the game, which is the scariest part. Because if they have a 6-card hand and they ditch everything except the pants, it doesn't really matter. You know, they just go off again.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I mean,
really disgusting card.
Yeah, and you can add this back, and for every other Rushia, you just get an extra card, so you need even less. You hit your draw brainstorm, you know, everything's live again. So really good card with this deck.
Lastly, at level 2, the Suisse anti-change counter. This is a ditch 2 anti-change, which most people I know don't like. You can go over all 3 cards. However, this one does send to bottom deck, unlike other ditch 2 anti-change would send to waiting room. It's a little bit of power creep, but I think it's good power creep. Ditch 2 is a really expensive cost in the mid game, whereas, you know, Hachima at the end game doesn't really matter. You want to live at all costs, drop again and attack again. But you are at level 2. This is basically a 2-card cheaper Hachima, which is why it's in the deck. This is the same strategy, but at level 2. So if you're at level 2, you have 2 Rushias down, you have the opportunity to grab a tap counter for later and then pick this one up if your opponent's still at level 2, or you expect them to still be at level 2 after your attack. You can use this to fog one of their lanes, stay at level 2 longer, and continue to assault your opponent with Rushia effect, which is why it's in the very important to be able to continue your level 2 as long as possible. That is why this is. Even if you are winning the lane anyway and your opponent is just playing a 2-soul beater, it behooves you to get that card off the board, especially if your opponent attacks incorrectly and doesn't attack with their single early play first, or if they have 2 early plays down, you nuke one that hasn't attacked yet, or you can one that is attacking if they've won, so that you just fog that lane of damage and continue on your merry way at level 2. Especially because aren't spawning additional Rushias, we have to spawn a Marine to heal it too, which we don't particularly want to do. Only want to do that when the game state is right for it, or that we have to. So being able to fog extra damage is really important. Interchange counters are also just hard skill checks. Having additional hard skill checks in your deck is very good when you're playing a deck like this that has so many hard skill checks in it. Things that your opponent cannot do and must play around, or they will most certainly lose unless you have a terrible. Getting into Rushia proper. So let's read this card down. This card has a lot of tech. Wordy. If you have 2 or more of the Hololive characters, gains 1500 power and hand on course. It is 10-5 base stat line. Obviously can come down early with the Noel and the Flare back row. So it's going to sit typically at 13k and have hand on core. That is really hard to get rid of, especially ability with its other effect in that spawn more cards. So when you play the pants, as long as you have another character, you choose a character in your waiting room and you either return it to your hand or put it at any slot in the stage. Depending on which one you do, you get one of the other effects. If you return it to your hand, you shuffle back any 4 cards in your opponent's waiting room to their deck. So you deck break them. If your opponent leaves a 1-card deck, this is game over. If you have 2 Rushias down, you can shuffle back 8 cards and just kill your opponent. So if your opponent tries to do the thing where they send their climax back and, you know, have that good refresh, instead they lose the game. So that's another hard skill check there. Very, very good, especially if your opponent is probably crashing or you are winning board with you. You are increasing the chances at the very least that your swing for 4 will stick, because you will be swinging for 4 more often than not in the climax down. And Rushia in an open lane, which is very, very common. But if you happen to spawn a card from your grave, notably, this character is not restricted by level, even though you are at level 2. You can spawn any level 3 at level 2 at any point in the game. That card gets 2500 power cross turn when it comes down. So spawn another Rushia, that's going to be 16-5 on attack, 15-5 cross turn. Really good for breaking down standby boards, really good for holding board against standby boards when they try to rebuild. Notably, a 16-5 Rushia can swing over President when President is buffed by the 1/1. President is 15-5 and your opponent cannot be blackoffs, so you can really swing over the President without a care in the world. Deck, even probably a nerf you still be playing in is the deck, so you expect to see it and you easily clear President. So you have the blowout effect of the shuffle back 4, which also pluses you and adds counters back to your hand to have tap counter, have anti-change counter, or additional Rushias or whatever you need. And then you can spawn cards. They get 2500 power until the next end of your opponent's turn. So the big bodies on. In my experience, sitting down against this card's invincible. In my experience playing the deck, this card's invincible. Your opponent literally cannot get rid of it. You have so many ways to prevent them from anything. You have Shion to move their Adachi around so they can't crash. You have ways to, for their early plays, cannot challenge it. The only thing that can get rid of it is the aforementioned President. They can swing over the non-buffed lane, they coming down, and then clock kick it, which will a big strain on your opponent's resources too, especially when they must leave probably another Rushia on the board that you spawned the previous turn, which can then spawn another Rushia and continue down the same path again. Get rid of that President that killed you. So there is really no way to get rid of this card when it comes down. It is unbelievably annoying. If you bounce it back to your opponent's hand, or you do something ridiculous, or you try to blink it and then hit over it, they have some counters. They can just play it down again because their flare isn't for less or 4 or more or something ridiculous. They just shit it out again. The card is unbelievably hard to get rid of, and it is really, really disgusting, and it is the reason why it lost so much play and continues to play. And I think it is probably the most obnoxious card to think about when you are building a new set for a meta, is you have to think about how you will deal with Rushia, a card that is fundamentally really, really hard for any deck to deal, even some of the biggest decks.
Yeah, and you know, it constantly makes your opponent have to play around you drawing into your pants once your Rushias are on board. Even if you blow your entire hand, like, they know as soon as you draw one, they can just die if their deck is large and they're
perfect,
out of
yeah.
So I mean, you have to really be cautious in playing into this and making sure that, you know, you're not leaving them a big grave that they can shuffle back and putting yourself in a bad position.
Yeah, so it's like so much compiled on one card. They clear your board, and if they don't clear your board, they kill you. It's a really obnoxious card. What do you think, Brian?
About Rushia?
Yeah,
Or...
I know you're scarred.
I mean...
You came back to locals. You and Tyler came back to locals, and you're just like, do you know about Rushia? And they're like, no.
I was like, I know about Rushia, but I haven't had the pleasure of playing into it yet. And since I have played into it quite a few times, the fact that you can't leave such a small deck and you have to sacrifice your compression in some cases just to get yourself to next deck, or hold up a free fresh counter or something to prevent yourself from insta dying to Rushia, is immediately something that makes the deck a threat against especially players who are less familiar with it.
Yeah, this deck is going to be a Swiss queen.
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
This is going to blow up people in Swiss that aren't prepared. So make sure you're ready. We talked about play patterns with Rushia. With your first Rushia down on the board, you should almost always spawn a second one. It might be very attractive to shuffle back your opponent's deck unless they have done the thing. The thing being leaving a 1-card deck with them at like high clock or something like that. So you nuke their next deck compression. You almost always summon the Rushia. You want to have those 2 Rushias down on board because it is so hard for your opponent to deal with. They both have hand on court. Again, do not care about your hand. Even if your opponent has some kind of jank to swing over both of these and kill them after they're down, there's again a 15-5 and 13-5 body, usually backed by a 2500 counter, one of them being anti-change counter. If your opponent can somehow swing over them, you just ditch 2 cards and they're alive again. The card's really hard to get rid of. You have Shion for Adachi strategies, stuff like that. If your opponent has Adachi, if you're sitting down against something like mob or something that has a really good Adachi that incentivizes to play otherwise, you can hit the Shion and make sure that your opponent can't Adachi. Yeah, really obnoxious card to deal with. And reason why this deck continue to play, and again, will continue to play all throughout the Springfest season and beyond until they print something better. They've started to print things similar to Rushia, but nothing as strong as Dome. And it's made even better by the rest of our level 3. So let's get into that. The big part of Rushia being able to spawn toolboxy cards and other level 3 order just make her even more ridiculous. So the most important of those is the Marines. It's the Marine from the trial deck. So it's placed on stage from hand or by the effect of the Rushia. You can heal one, so it is a way to heal from the grave. It is a way to elongate the level 2. It is bound, and it has this other really cool effect that has really good synergy with shuffling back cards in the later game. Because again, this card is probably going to live, going to be in front of a level assist, 11-5, and then have 2,500 power, 15k swinging in, 14k on the swing back for your opponent to clear. That's still really big. It has on attack, pay 1, discard any card, choose up to 3 of your characters, give them 500 power and a soul. This is like Awesomeness Commanding Strength from Sal. However, you cannot choose characters twice, but you can only choose specific characters. So it lets you set up your attacks in a way to get perfect side attacks, to get specific big damage, to swing when your opponent is out. This card can be like a lethal summon. If your opponent like triggers the last climax in their deck or something terrifying, shuffle, you have 2 Rushias on board, you shuffle back 4, you summon 1 of these, you pump your whole board, and you swing like 5-5-5, and your opponent just everything and blows up dies. It's a really big part of the fact that Rushia has like a blowout strategy on top of being a very resilient defensive deck. The card, while also being a heal on top of that. So this card does a lot, the deck. It also has really good art. Love Sin. He's my favorite. Any other thoughts on the Marine?
No, I think that covered it pretty well. I mean, there's nothing that this like there's never a terrible time to play this card. I mean, if you're about to, I've had situations where, you know, I'm shot up to 3-6 and I still thankfully have a pants in hand, and then you can, if you have 2 of these in grave, you can just triple heal. And if you're in an absolute like bad state, or like there's just situations where this can really end games or prolong them if you need to. I mean, it gives you a lot of versatility.
Notably, Rushia does not have to summon to an open slot, so you can summon down the Marine, heal, summon another Marine over her, heal, summon the original Marine back, heal again. So it makes your climax combo also have the ability to heal if you want. So you're just adding ability.
Very cool, yeah. As if Rushia needed more.
Yeah, Watame early play. This is our anti-board card of choice, and I'll get into why. It is a 4 or more character early play. Then on play, you reveal top. As long as that card is a Hololive character, you choose one of your opponent's characters in the front row and bottom deck it. Just outright remove it from the field. Just goodbye, gone. So there are a couple things you can do with cards. The reason we are playing this and not the IMA, you might have noticed that we are in red enough to play a 3. The IMA is also an additional power pump to our board. I think it's attractive. However, level down the current meta, especially about Mushoku. If your opponent is at level 2, we play the IMA, or they have multiple level 3s on board, which the IMA only activate hand. It does not activate when pull it out from Rushia, neither does this card. However, when you would level down Mushoku, they have a grave, which again, they have to level down, cannot level down if your opponent left a grave. You are going to be pulling out Ghislaines when you remove their 3-2. If you remove a 2k, like if you remove a Paul, remove another card, they shit out 2 more Ghislaines, and they have global 2k on the board again, which depending on their backups, depending on their board, because you can't touch their back row, even if you do touch their back row with the IMA, they're going to put a Ghislaine in the back row and they're going to front row. That's still 2k to their board, and it might even be worse because global. So you are removing a decent amount of power. However, removing a card from the board completely is better. So if you have the ability to completely remove the Paul from the board, if you're afraid of it, you're afraid of the reflect, you're afraid of something like that, it removes their pump to their front row. 1500 is a lot of power. This just straight up get rid of it and you don't have to deal with it. It's also on color. You don't have to worry about having red play IMA or something like that if you happen to whiff it, because low amount of red want to clutch our tap counters. So our red is very lean in the deck, even though we could support IMA. I think that this card is probably just better, especially into other cards. Like it just removes President, it just removes other problem cards from the board. If cards have weird effects or something like that, it removes Exile from the board if your opponent's playing that. It's just a better, overall more versatile, simple removal card rather than level down, even though IMA is a double level down. So color and just more versatility by a simpler effect is why we play the Watame over, especially with this being an early play. It is live an entire level earlier.
The IMA also is an early play though.
It is.
But it's harder.
I'll hold my IMA believerness for when we get to.
You can choose to split it, and we have some potential tech card changes.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think the coin flip's ever really a big deal. You're not playing any events, so it's just your climaxes, and you know the odds of hitting that are very, very low.
All right. right, last 3 level 3 here, moving pretty quickly. Stock swap, monster stock swap. You gotta have stock swap in your modern deck so that your opponent can't disrespect you and amass a mountain of stock, so that, you know, your big swings of shit don't go through. So it's an important card to have. Your opponent has to have it, so that they can't send a much stock and kill you. Notably, you can do cute plays where your opponent doesn't leave a grave but has a lot of stock swap them, and then shuffle back their entire grave. Normally, stock swaps like that are just random, where you're cutting random cards off your opponent's deck, you aren't doing a good stock swap. I will link Tyler's stock swap video description for how to use stock swap effectively. But you can do Randy stock swap with Monstery and then shuffle back all those clean cards with Rushia and get a pretty good deck break. So it has that extra little bit of utility there. It also swings massive whenever you use an act ability. So if you're Brainstorm or something like that, 5,000, your opponent's back row, so up to 12k. So she's a pretty big attacker, along with the rest of your board, which is also can't be summoned off Rushia by her effect, but it is an important card to have. Just threaten it. Card that can be summoned off Rushia is this Subaru. So this is going to be our burn option summoned off of Rushia. So a way to push a little bit extra damage is a on-play heal if we play it from hand. And if we meet that yellow, red, and blue experience condition at level 3, she has on attack, pay 2, reveal top. As long as it's a character, you burn 2. So a pretty good rate for on attack burn 2. Just pay 2 top checks, as long as the climax. Tanner said, pretty unlikely. You get that burn 2. And again, you can summon this card off of Rushia because her ability is on attack. This is the main reason we are playing enough red to facilitate it, because in my experience, it's important to have a game pushing option, especially if your opponent is somehow clearing the Rushias. They are fighting for board. They are finding a way to get over your stuff. You need to have a way to track back and push for game to eat game. So it is an important card to have. That's why we have enough red. It's also an additional healer. Always nice. And lastly, the Watame TD card. What did you say, Tanner? Sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. I was going to say this card has closed out a ton of games that I played with this deck, with the Duck, because dealing 2 damage, if they don't leave you good side, can actually be sometimes pretty difficult, since you're normally swinging at least 3/3/3. So I think having that potential to swing smaller with that on attack burn 2 is very helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And lastly, the TD Watame. It is on play, pay 1, salvage a climax. That is the most important effect. Helps us recur our Rushias in the end game. Make sure we have it. If we have extra climaxes and we need to get extra cards, maybe an extra Rushia to shuffle back into the 4, we can discard a climax card, salvage. Of course, they're built-in synergy where you pay 1 to salvage a climax and then do the other effects, since they are both on placement effect, and then ditch that climax to salvage a character. So you have that little bit of extra utility there. Very good solid card for a deck that wants to recur its climax combo as possible. You have, again, 3 climax assurance cards, very powerful, tutorable climax assurance cards. Make sure we can pick them up. Notably, this card can be picked up off choice. So if you trigger choice and this card is in your grave, it's kind of like triggering a pants, because you can pick up a pants on the following turn, probably have a pants in play. So you can pick this up, pay 3 overall, grab your pants back and off again. And of course, choice pants, pretty good lineup for the deck. Extra stock, extra salvages are big cards that you can game and play. You can grab you. Then pants, of course, grabbing additional pants, grabbing additional climaxes of any kind that we can swap back into our Rushia climax we played is good. Doesn't matter what climax is in our hand, we need a climax to be able to swap it out, play the game again. Being able to salvage when we shuffle back cards, we can always salvage climax swapper. We can salvage the Watame that we looked at. Salvage ways to get back into our correct climax and continue assault our opponent with Rushia effects, which, you know, everybody loves. Here's the deck all laid out again, but before we get into closing thoughts, there are a couple additional cards that you might want to swap out. I'm going to let Tanner talk about these because I'm the one who go ahead about the IMA, Tanner.
Yeah, so starting with the IMA, if you have yellow and blue in your level, you early play it, you're always going to have yellow and blue. You know, that's how you play your entire deck. It's a global 15, which normally isn't too necessary because, I mean, the fact that you're already massive, but I have had instances where you can use this at, like, if you play this at the end of level 2 where you know you're going to go up to level 3, you can put this instead of your Brainstormer, or put this instead of your Flare, so that way it gives it to the far left Rushia that's away from your normal level assist. So it's just another way to guarantee some power, make your board extra big. And this is the double level down. If you're not playing, or depending on how your opponent's grave is, I think that this can be more beneficial. It doesn't hard remove them, so they can still encore it, but in certain instances, you know, you're making them bleed hand. You're like in the Rushia mirror, hard removing one Rushia is good, but you could also use this. That way your opponent has to dump 2 cards to save 2 Rushias. Therefore, they won't have enough for tap counter. They would still be able to anti-change if you are still at level 2, but it does remove their tap counter from their arsenal if they choose to save their Rushias. Otherwise, they're leaving an open lane, or well, a lower level lane as well. So can always crash over or beat over those. So I really like the IMA. Splitting the Watame and the IMA also gives you that extra card of red, going up to 8 red, just in case you're like me and are always scared that you're not going to hit your colors. You have tons of ways to set them, but you know, when you low roll, it helps your floor for getting your duck off.
All right, next one here.
Yeah, so this is the Aqua. So this has a couple of reasons to play this. Mainly if you start level 2 at 2-0 or 2-1, this lets you brainstorm. You play this down, you scry, you restand your brainstormer. That way you can still play Rushia that turn. So it lets you still have a brainstorm, which is the main thing about this. It's just a cute one of for those niche situations, but also it's a scry into a console. So, extra cards in hand, it lets you plus the cards you want and keep your hand filter, which also helps you set a Rushia engrave or a Marian engrave, depending on, if maybe you just refresh your deck, you don't want to beat on it too hard. The draw ditch there can really be beneficial.
And last.
So this one is an interesting one. I personally haven't played with this card a bunch, but I've played into it a few times here. So this is level 0 on board, so it cannot be level downed, and it has a bunch of various effects on this. So on reverse, you can burn one, and also it can't be sided, so they have to front this. It sits at it can only be spawned because we aren't playing green besides the Fubukis, which you never really think about. It's only a 2 of, you can never count on that being in there. So basically you're always going to spawn so the turn that's spawned, if it's spawned not behind a level assist, you're sitting 14. So behind a level assist, you're 15-5. They're forced to front it, which helps you clear lanes, and they'll probably be reversed, so you can always just ditch one, burn one, and you also get damage scry. So it's just a nice one of that you can play that just gives you a ton of modularity and effect.
Well, it's not damage scry chanter. This is check and wreck.
Oh, sorry.
This is better.
Even better.
Better. It's different. It's a very different kind of effect. I don't think check and wreck comes up a lot. The last check and wreck card that we saw was Reagan in English.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I don't think a lot of people are familiar with the effect. So instead of it being when you take damage like Goblin Slayer, it cards frontal attack, which they must do again. So this helps you play in a tab counter as well as just being another really fat body on board. Big baby. He is a big baby. But yeah, that is the deck. In terms of where you would put those cards, that is like your Shion slot, your Bukichiri slot, your drop salvage slot for 0, and it's probably the other Watame slot or the Subaru burner slot. You can play the Luna and the burner slot. I think the Watame and the stock swap are probably a little bit too important. You can't really get rid of those, but you can take one of the Watames or one of these heroes. Not afraid of Adachi, you got Shion, put the Aqua in there. But again, list is pretty ironclad. Your flex Watts are really freeze, like the Watame, the Subaru, the anti-change counter. Some people play the anti-change counter. Bukichiri is not as popular, and of course the X slots. The rest of the deck is pretty much required for the deck to run as ended. But in closing, we'll see this deck. You will see this deck at Springfest from the second that it is released, because if you didn't notice, this deck is mostly trial deck cards. This is like, people were looking at this at the beginning, this is like a pile of trial deck cards. The only double rare in this deck is the Fubukichiri, and it's not even required to play the deck. So you will see it. This deck is going to be unbelievably cheap. It's unbelievably disgusting. It's unbelievably powerful. You will see it. It'll be a meta threat and meta annoyance for a long time. Don't see that going. It will always be there. Even if it is poorly positioned, we'll still play it because it is Hololive. It plays a lot of their favorite girls. It plays a lot of different girls in one deck, too. It lets people really at least play some of the cards they like. So playing more for the characters, more for the anime, more for the VTubers. They can include a lot of different cards. They can even swap out the Aqua Plus and go play something they want. You'll see Rushia in some form for sure. You happen to attend regionals after this set is allowed, which I believe is Houston and forward.
I believe so.
Yeah, I think is there
Houston and forward, barring any delays or like that.
There's no events in May for Springfest.
There probably are.
I think there's Georgia.
So then Georgia.
Georgia.
Yeah, there's one event where Hololive is not legal because they have a rule now where sets are not legal for 2 weeks after they release in English.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's one regional where that rule does apply for Hololive. I'm not sure which regional that is.
Yeah, it might be the Georgia one then.
It might be Georgia, yeah.
Yeah, so with that new rule that English decks have to wait 2 weeks after release, that will mean Georgia will not be legal, but for Jersey, Puerto Rico, Houston, and Mexico for the North America and Latin America event, this deck will be good. So for most of the Springfest, you will see this deck.
All right, and with that, I think we're gonna wrap wrap up here. Card games, competitive, the usual. We don't own or operate those Discords, but talk about Weiss. Catch some webcam games or Weiss fight games, definitely hop in there. You talk about the game, connect with people from all over the world. Global and NA Facebook groups, you'll buy, sell, trade Weiss Schwartz, get your hands on the set, or just maybe get some reveals for upcoming sets that come in KP. All the translations are posted there from hard workers in our community that both translate and compile those resources. Those same resources are also available on Discord. There are Card of the Day channels that have translated cards, and they update daily, so you can as well. And if you want to try Rushia before your English cards are available at the end of this month, you can check out Weiss Fight. Hop on Encore Decks, grab the link from our description, make an account, slam it in there, and you are instantly playing Weiss in your browser from all over the world. Definitely give that a look. There's a Discord and a Patreon, both linked in the description if you'd like to support the project. The dev is very amenable to feedback if you'd like to help support and better the product, so definitely give that a look. It's all free in your browser, no need to install anything or anything like that. In terms of upcoming content, Rush Rundown's basically on hold. I have some real life stuff going on. I'm not really able to sit at my computer and edit them. They take a lot of editing, stuff like that. We do have the slideshows made. We just record them and stuff like that. But after my stuff is done, I'm able to do that. We can definitely get pumping those out. Wanted to get those ready before Springfest, but a lot of things did not go my way in terms of scheduling and stuff like that. So unfortunately, we will not be able. But upcoming, more Hololive deck tech. Every week of April, we are going to highlight a different Hololive. They're all very good. They all have their own meta niche. They are all very cool and unique. So because Hololive is such a wide set, there's all the keys and whole oversized booster on top of that for you to build with. A lot of cool stuff in the set, and we want to highlight it as we approach probably Weiss's biggest release. I think Tanner showed up to locals because he heard about this game through Hololive. And now he's a full-fledged member of our community and now on here recording videos. If Tanner can show up even with the set isn't out in English and buy JP cards and learn that way, God knows how many people can show up when it's actually out in English on store shelves and they see that Hololive is in Weiss. Going to be really big for the game.
I mean, between Hololive coming out this month and Ruby that just came out, the shelf appeal of this game is massive now.
Yeah, we have grabbing people from both ends. The degenerate VTuber hole that we are all in, and then the more Americanized side with all the English stuff like that. In terms of set reviews, we basically don't have anything until Attack on Titan.
We have Quince 2 now.
Oh, Quince 2. We can do Quince 2. Okay,
yeah,
I'll have to start prepping. So Quince 2 on the horizon will probably be our next.
Tokyo Revengers.
And then whatever gets announced
on Friday. Yeah, whatever gets announced
today. It'll be today. Yeah,
whatever gets announced today. So definitely give that a look tonight at 11 p.m.
Everybody
EST.
Mobset 2.
Yeah, Mobset 2. Thank God.
Mobset 2, let's go.
Please, Mobset 2, my pipe dream. All right, and with that, Pittsburgh Weiss Schwartz signing off. We'll see you guys in the next one.